So Jeffrey Dahmer really did ramp up his offending. The scale and the nature of his behaviour became all the more grotesque. So he wasn't just killing people, dismembering them, and then disposing of their bodies. He started to do some really bizarre things.
He was in the process of constructing some hideously diabolical shrine in his bedroom out of the skulls and skeletons of some of his victims. It's almost as though some bizarre, archaic thing had broken through and he was performing or creating some sort of ancient, human sacrificial temple in this little Milwaukee apartment.
In 1990, Dahmer killed another 4 young men. His MO was becoming more and more polished.
He would offer his victims money to go back to his apartment with him to take pictures, nude photographs of them, and then perhaps to have sex. Every single one of his victims went with him willingly. He would offer them a drink, and once he found out what they wanted to drink, he kept a lot of things on hand, different kinds of alcohol, and that's when he would put a drug in it that would put them to sleep, or that would relax them so that they would pass out.
They would pass out. He would then have sex with them while they were passed out, do with them as he wished, but of course they couldn't do to him. Then as they approached recovery, coming out of it, he would strangle them to death.
It seemed as though Dahmer got a thrill, not from the murder, but from the dead bodies of his victims.
Dahmer liked necrophilia. He liked sex with unconscious people. He wasn't a slasher in the sense that he took delight in killing. His purpose was sex with these people, company with these people. That's hard to believe.
He would commit necrophiliac sex acts on the corpses, dismember the corpses, dissolve parts of the bodies in these vats of acid he had, keep certain organs in his refrigerator, some of which he would actually cannibalize.
Dahmer said that the cannibalism that he engaged in was born out of a curiosity. He wanted to find out, first of all, what that would be like. He also said that there was an element of wanting to make these people a part of him, so they would be with him forever.
Dahmer, from the beginning, was driven by this terror of being alone. He said he killed his first victim, Stephen Hicks, when Hicks said he had to go, and Dahmer didn't want to be alone. There's some desire, which is part of normal sexuality. You love somebody, somebody will say, oh, I love you so much, I want to eat you up. With normal people, that's obviously metaphorical, but it does express some desire to be so close to the person that you want to incorporate them into, you want to merge with them. With somebody like Dahmer, that becomes this very literal horror.
And the horror only became worse when Dahmer began experimenting with his semi-conscious victims.
He would drill holes in their skulls and put muriatic acid inside to see if he could get them to a zombie state so that he could keep them alive and subservient to him.
It's essentially an amateur version of attempting to perform a lobectomy or a lobotomy, but it would be an incredibly unpleasant and damaging thing to do to someone's brain. If you affect the frontal lobes, you will affect personality, potentially make somebody docile. If he's less accurate, you could essentially cause a stroke that could cause paralysis, speech problems. It really very much depends on which part of the brain is actually damaged.
But, of course, that didn't work, and his victims died one after another. Hearing about that is the stuff of horror movies. And the fact that it was happening in a city where we were known for manufacturing and beer and a very good Midwestern work ethic, tight families, this isn't the kind of thing that happens here.
In May 1991, 31-year-old Jeffrey Dahmer was in his killing prime. He'd already murdered 11 men and had begun collecting bones and skulls from his victims and cannibalizing their organs. What would have been a nightmare for most was a fantasy for him. and he carefully went about his killings under the radar of the police and the people of Milwaukee.
Jeffrey Dahmer had a job in a local chocolate factory, and I think for him it enabled him to maintain a facade of normality. He was just an average Joe, a regular guy who went to work every day.
I think he killed so many people without being caught because of the fact that he looked like everyone else. He did what successful serial killers do. He blended. They blend in with society. Now, he was a Caucasian male living in a predominantly African-American neighborhood, but he didn't talk to anybody. He didn't bother anybody. He was barely someone people noticed. Barely noticed. He also was targeting people who, he found out, might not be missed.
For most people, if they were to commit the type of acts that Jeffrey Dahmer did, they would no way be able to function normally. But Jeffrey Dahmer was not most people. He hasn't got the same level of repulsion and shock at dead bodies or mutilated bodies that most of us have. It was just another aspect of his life.
It was not known that we had a serial slayer loose in our city. We did not know because he was so cleverly disposing of the bodies. The families were reporting the sons were missing, but the police were not finding bodies. And not infrequently, young men, something happens in their life, they just up and leave town. That happens enough that the police don't get worried. If it's a woman, they'll immediately commit resources to investigate, but young men, they don't.
But on May the 26th, 1991, Dahmer came agonizingly close to capture after an encounter with a 14-year-old boy.
Dahmer had taken Konarak Synthesyphone, a young Asian male who he found attractive. He met him in the mall, offered him money to go back to his apartment. He went, and he began to work the ritual. Dahmer would drug him, and then he began the process of this crude lobotomy, and he had drilled a hole in this young man's head. He took a break. He ran out to get more beer. While he was gone, Konarak ran out of the apartment. He was naked, he was completely dazed, and he was running up the alley next to Dahmer's apartment building. A woman in another apartment building saw him running up the alley and said, "There's a boy running up the alley, something's going on," and then these women called the police.
And then Dahmer appeared. And again, this is another remarkable characteristic of these psychopaths, is that they have an ability to maintain, a kind of coolness under the most extraordinarily high-pressured circumstances.
So he walked up to the officers. "Good evening, officers." He's very polite, he's sober, and he said, "This is my boyfriend. He came to stay with me. We had a little bit too much to drink, and he ran out of the house." He said, "How old is he?" Dahmer said, "He's 19. And the officers said, "Okay, well, just to make sure, let's all walk back up to the apartment together."
The cops went in and looked around. They even peeked into the bedroom where there was a decomposing corpse of one of Dahmer's previous victims, but, they took such a cursory look at it that they didn't even notice it.
Assuming the couple were having a lover's tiff, the two police officers left Konarak alone with Dahmer in the apartment building. And in the early hours of the morning, he murdered the 14-year-old boy. An opportunity to catch the killer had been missed.
I think that really speaks volumes about the attitudes of the police at the time in terms of ethnic minorities, in terms of young people, in terms of the gay community, and that was another victim that could potentially have been saved. So there's this terrible thing going on behind closed doors and people just aren't seeing it. People aren't wanting to see it. Even the police are not joining up the dots and finding out what's really going on. So this is allowed to just bubble away and get worse.
After evading capture, Dahmer was free to continue.
There was two sides, really, to Dahmer's pleasure that he got from killing his victims. So he was a sadist who enjoys the pain and suffering of other people. And with sadists, that thrill ends when the victim dies. But Dahmer was also something of a necrophiliac who was interested in having corpses around and doing things with those corpses. And that means that the thrill starts with death. So he has this continuous fulfillment going on. And he's always fully in control. And I think that's what's really at the root of Jeffrey Dahmer. It's power and it's control, and it's the feeling that he has all this knowledge about what he's done and nobody else quite knows what he's up to.
By July 1991, Dahmer's desire to kill had become insatiable. In just 16 days, he murdered 4 more men, bringing his total number of victims to 17. But Dahmer's reign of terror was about to come to an end. On July the 22nd, he met a man called Tracy Edwards.
While they were together in the apartment, Dahmer threw a handcuff on him. This was now the beginning of his ritual. Dahmer had taken photographs of his victims in various stages of dismemberment, Polaroids. And those were sitting on the dresser inside the bedroom. They weren't sitting out in the main living room, but there was some speculation that Tracy Edwards had perhaps seen that. And he ran out of the apartment in his underwear, ran down the street, and when he saw the police car, Tracy Edwards has said his intention was just to get the handcuff off. That's all he wanted. He stopped these cops to say, hey, can you just get this off of me? So he stopped, and the officers start talking to him about what he saw, and then they said, well, we should probably check this out. Let's all go back to the apartment. Dahmer answered, and the minute he saw that it was the police, he tried to shut the door on them. The police pushed the door open a bit. They started struggling with him, and then finally, he just gave in. And that was when Dahmer was officially finished. He was finished killing, and he knew that he was finished.